Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are opening a file that is, without any exaggeration, one of the heaviest, most complex, and I'd say arguably most tragic dossiers in modern political history. We're looking at a figure who essentially crafted the blueprint for a nuclear-armed nation, split a country in two, and then ended his own life on the gallows.
Yeah, we're talking about Zulfikar Ali Bhutto.
Exactly. And this is a man who is quite literally the definition of polarization.
Oh, absolutely. To some, he's a martyr for democracy. To others, he's this Machiavellian villain who broke Pakistan. There's almost no middle ground.
There really isn't. And I was reading through the source material, this extensive biographical record we pulled together, and the contradictions are just screaming at you from every single page.
We really are.
I mean, here is a guy who is a Western-educated aristocrat, studied at Berkeley and Oxford, wore Savile Row suits, probably drank scotch.
Right. Yeah.
Yet he branded himself the Quadiawa.
The leader of the people.
The leader of the people. He was a champion of the poor, who was also, himself, a feudal lord.
And the contradictions don't stop there. I mean, he was a Democrat who gave Pakistan its first consensus constitution. A huge achievement.
A huge deal, yeah.
But he also ruled for a time as a civilian chief martial law administrator. The two things just don't seem to fit together.
It plays out like a Shakespearean tragedy. It really does. And what's wild is that this story isn't just history. It's not some dusty archive. I saw in the notes that as recently as March 2024, the Supreme Court of Pakistan revisited his trial.
That's right, just a few months ago. 45 years after his execution, the highest court in the land officially gave an opinion that he didn't get a fair trial.
So they admitted it.
They admit it. So this isn't ancient history at all. It's a wound that is still very much open in the political psyche of South Asia. The ghost of Bhutto is still a very real player in Pakistani politics.
Okay, let's unpack this. We have a massive amount of ground to cover. We need to look at his meteoric rise, the absolute catastrophe of 1971, the Islamic bomb, and of course the judicial murder. But let's start at the beginning. Who was Zulfikar Ali Bhutto before he became this legend?
To understand the man, you have to understand the soil he grew up on. He was born in 1928 in Sindh, which was then part of British India, and he wasn't just born wealthy, he was born into, feudal royalty.
Okay.
His father, Sir Shahnawaz Bhutto, was a massive figure. He was the Dewan, or prime minister, of the princely state of Junagadh.
So he grows up seeing power being wielded at a very, very high level. He's not learning politics from books. He's seeing it at the dinner table.
Exactly. But he doesn't stay in that feudal bubble. And this is the first pivotal shift. He goes to the United States for his education. He lands at the University of Southern California and then transfers to UC Berkeley.
And this is the late 1940s we're talking about.
Late 40s. So you can imagine, Berkeley in the late 40s. For a feudal kid from Sindh, it must have been a completely different planet.
Oh, it must have changed his entire worldview.
It absolutely did. And at Berkeley, he's not just, going to parties. He is devouring socialist theory. He's reading Marx. He's actually giving lectures on campus, debating whether socialism can be compatible with Islamic heritage. He's building this intellectual framework that would later define his entire political career.
Right.
But there is something else that happens while he's there that is it's crucial.
The notes mention he was in the U.S. when the Soviets tested their first nuclear weapon.
Yes, in 1949.
Yeah.
And he witnessed the reaction in the United States firsthand. He saw the fear, but he also saw the respect and the sudden shift in global power dynamics. He realized right then and there that nuclear capability wasn't just about a big explosion. It was about sovereignty. It was the currency of power. If you had the bomb, the world it treated you differently.
That is a fascinating connection. So the seed for the Pakistani nuclear program wasn't planted in some war room in the 70s.
Nope.
It was planted in a dorm room in Berkeley in 1949.
Precisely. After Berkeley, he goes to Oxford Christchurch College to study law. Then he gets called to the bar at Lincoln's Inn. So by the time he's done, he's polished, he's brilliant, he's incredibly charismatic, and he is just fiercely ambitious.
And when he returns to Pakistan, he doesn't just want to be a lawyer.
Oh, no.
He wants to rule.
And he rises fast. The sources say he became a cabinet minister in 1958. He was the youngest member of the cabinet.
Yeah, first under President Iskandar Mirza and then under the military ruler, General Ayub Khan. And you've got to picture this. He's in his early 30s, surrounded by these old generals and stuffy bureaucrats, and he is outshining every single one of them.
But the real turning point, the moment Bhutto becomes Bhutto, the figure we know, is when he becomes foreign minister in 1963.
Yes, this is where he starts to really steer the ship. This is where he starts shifting Pakistan's foreign policy, right? Because up until then, Pakistan was pretty firmly in the American camp.
Firmly is an understatement. Pakistan was known as America's most allied ally in Asia. They were part of SEATO and CENTO.
Hold on, let's just clarify those acronyms for everyone. SEATO and CENTO.
Sure. Think of them as the Asian versions of NATO. They were these anti-communist military alliances designed to contain the Soviet Union and China.
Okay.
Pakistan was a key member, which meant it was officially aligned against the entire communist bloc. But Bhutto, he looked at the map and basically said, this is insane.
Right. You've got this massive neighbor right there.
Exactly. He's saying, we share a border with China, we have a hostile India next door, why are we alienating our most powerful neighbor to please a superpower that's halfway across the world? It just didn't make strategic sense to him.
So he decides to pivot to Beijing.
He becomes the architect of the Sino-Pakistan relationship. He negotiates and signs the Sino-Pakistan Boundary Agreement. He pushes for trade, for military cooperation. And you have to remember the context here. This is the height of the Cold War.
The U.S. must have been furious.
They were paranoid about China. So Bhutto is basically poking the American bear right in the eye. And he's doing it with style.
But it wasn't just diplomacy. There was a war involved here, too. The 1965 war with India.
This is where we see the hawk side of Bhutto. He wasn't just a diplomat, he was an agitator. He was the primary advocate for something called Operation Gibraltar.
Operation Gibraltar. It sounds like an action movie title. What was the plan?
The plan was to covertly infiltrate Pakistani troops into Indian-administered Kashmir to try and incite an uprising against Indian rule.
Okay.
And Bhutto convinced President Ayub Khan that India would not dare to cross the international border in retaliation, that the whole conflict would just stay contained in Kashmir.
That turned out to be a massive miscalculation.
A colossal miscalculation. India responded by launching a full-scale attack on Lahore and Sialkot, right across the international border. It blew up into a full-blown conventional war.
And what was the result?
Well, both sides claimed victory, but really it was a stalemate. And that stalemate eventually led everyone to the negotiating table. Ayub Khan went to Tashkent, in the Soviet Union, of all places, to sign a peace treaty with India.
The Tashkent Declaration.
Right, and this treaty basically just restored the status quo. It was seen by the public in Pakistan as a total surrender of what had been won on the battlefield.
So people were angry.
They were furious. They had been told by state media that they were winning, and then suddenly their leader is signing this, what they saw as a humiliating truce. Bhutto saw this public anger, and he tapped right into it.
He threw his boss under the bus.
He absolutely did. He resigned from the government and went public, accusing Ayub Khan of losing at the negotiating table what the army had won on the field. It was a masterstroke of populism. He completely distanced himself from the failure that he, in large part, helped create, and he rode this wave of anti-government sentiment.
That brings us to 1967. He's out of government, he's on the streets, and he founds the Pakistan People's Party, the PPP.
And this is where he changes the game. Until Bhutto, politics in Pakistan was a drawing room affair. It was for the elite, the landlords, the industrialists.
Right.
Bhutto took it to the masses. He came up with a slogan that is still, to this day, the most powerful political slogan in the country's history. Roti, kapra, or makan.
Food, clothing, and shelter.
Simple, primal, it connects with everyone. But the full manifesto was this potent cocktail. Islam is our faith, democracy is our policy, socialism is our economy. All power to the people.
That is a fascinating mix. You've got religion, democracy, and socialism all wrapped up together. It literally covers every possible base.
It was revolutionary for its time. He mobilized the peasants in the fields, the laborers in the factories, the radical student unions in the cities. He traveled by train, stopping at these tiny little stations, rolling up his sleeves, literally unbuttoning his collar and screaming himself hoarse. He made the common man feel like he mattered for the first time.
He was electric.
He was completely electric.
So he builds this massive fervent base in West Pakistan. But then we hit 1970, the elections. And this is the pivot point where the story turns from a political drama into a national tragedy.
The 1970 elections are crucial. This was the first ever general election held in Pakistan on the basis of adult franchise. One person, one vote. And the results were just stark. They highlighted the fatal flaw in the country's geography.
Right, because Pakistan was two wings west and east, separated by 1,000 miles of India.
Exactly. And East Pakistan, what is now Bangladesh, had a larger population. So in the elections, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman's Awami League won virtually every single seat in East Pakistan.
So they gave them an absolute majority in the national parliament.
A clear, absolute majority. So by all democratic rules, Sheikh Mujib should have been the prime minister of the entire country.
But the power centers in West Pakistan, the military, the bureaucracy, and of course Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, they were not ready to hand over power to a Bengali party.
Not at all.
This is where Bhutto's democratic credentials take a massive hit in the historical record. He refused to sit in the opposition.
He did. He famously said that the legs of any party member who went to the assembly session in Dhaka would be broken. It was a direct threat.
And he used a phrase that has haunted history ever since. Idhar hum udhar tum.
We rule here, you rule there.
Just splitting the country down the middle.
Now, there is some debate about whether he used those exact words in a public speech or if it was a headline that summarized his position, but the sentiment was undeniable. He was proposing a power-sharing formula that had absolutely no basis in the Constitution. He was telling the majority winner, you can't rule over us.
You have a deadlock, a total political stalemate. And while the politicians are arguing, the streets in the East are burning.
It just spirals completely out of control. The military regime of Yahya Khan decides to solve this political problem with military force. They launch Operation Searchlight in March 1971.
And what was that?
It was a brutal, horrific military crackdown in East Pakistan. Sheikh Mujib is arrested, a civil war erupts, millions of refugees flee into India. It's a humanitarian catastrophe.
It doesn't end well for Pakistan.
It ends in total disaster. India intervenes in support of the Bengali rebels. War breaks out in December 1971, and within 2 weeks, the Pakistan army in the east is surrounded. On December 16, 1971, they surrender.
93,000 prisoners of war, half the country gone. East Pakistan becomes the independent nation of Bangladesh.
It was a psychological trauma that is hard for us to overstate. The two-nation theory, the very founding idea that Muslims of the subcontinent were one nation, it seemed to collapse overnight.
The military was humiliated. Yahya Khan resigned in disgrace.
He had to, and who steps in to pick up the pieces?
Zulfikar Ali Bhutto. He flies back from the UN in New York, and on December 20, 1971, he takes over.
And here's that paradox again. He becomes president, but because the Constitution is suspended, he also becomes the first and only civilian chief martial law administrator.
So he's a democratically elected leader, but he's wielding the absolute power of a military dictator to fix the country.
That was his argument, that it was necessary. The country was broken. The state itself was on the verge of collapse. He had to rebuild it from scratch.
So what does that rebuilding look like? I mean, where do you even begin? He's got 93,000 soldiers stuck in Indian POW camps. He's lost 5,000 square miles of territory in the West. The economy is shattered. The national morale is at rock bottom.
You begin with diplomacy. His first big test was the Simla Agreement in 1972. He goes to India to meet with Prime Minister Indira Gandhi. Now, you have to think about his negotiating position. He has literally zero leverage.
None.
India holds all the cards. They have the land and they have the prisoners. He has nothing but a defeated army and a demoralized nation behind him.
So how did he pull it off? Because the notes say he got the land back and the prisoners back.
He played a brilliant psychological game. He knew that Indira Gandhi didn't really want a chaotic, collapsing Pakistan on her border. That would be a security nightmare for India.
Right. A failed state next door is bad for everyone.
Exactly. So he convinced her that if she humiliated him too much, his fragile new democratic government would fall and the crazy generals would come back to power. He pleaded, he charmed, he threatened. He used every tool in his arsenal.
He used his own weakness as leverage.
Precisely. And it worked. He managed to secure the return of the 5,000 square miles of territory and set the stage for the eventual release of all 93,000 POWs. And critically, he did it without compromising on Pakistan's core stance on Kashmir. It was, objectively, a masterclass in diplomacy.
So he secures the borders. Now he has to secure the state itself.
Yeah.
That brings us to the 1973 Constitution.
This is arguably his most enduring positive legacy. Pakistan had been struggling to write a viable constitution for 25 years. It had gone through multiple versions. Bhutto managed to get a consensus document approved by every single political party.
Everyone signed on. The religious right, the secular left.
Everyone. The regional nationalists from the smaller provinces, everyone. It was a moment of national unity.
And what did it change?
It established a parliamentary system which meant Bhutto shifted from being president to the more powerful position of prime minister. But it also defined the state's religious identity more sharply. It officially declared Pakistan an Islamic republic and required that the prime minister and president must be Muslims.
Okay, and then there's the socialism part of his manifesto. He started nationalizing everything, didn't he?
He did. And this is where the legacy gets really murky. He wanted to break the monopoly of the 22 families, these wealthy industrial groups that controlled the vast majority of Pakistan's economy. So he nationalized steel, chemicals, and cement.
Which, for a socialist agenda, that makes sense.
It does. But then he went further, much further.
How much further?
He nationalized all the banks, the insurance companies, and then he went after the small fish. He nationalized flour mills, rice husking units, even cotton ginning factories.
Wait. So if I owned a small family-run rice mill in a village somewhere,
Yeah.
the government just took it over?
Yes. And the government bureaucrats who were sent to run it had no idea how to run a rice mill. Efficiency just plummeted. Corruption skyrocketed. And critically, he alienated the middle class and the small business owners, the very backbone of the economy.
So it completely backfired.
It spooked investors for decades. It's a policy that many economists still point to as a major setback for Pakistan's economic development.
So mixed results on the economy, put it mildly. But on the global stage, he was still trying to position Pakistan as a major leader.
Oh, absolutely. The 1974 Islamic Summit in Lahore, this was his show. He hosted leaders from 37 Muslim countries, Gaddafi from Libya, King Faisal from Saudi Arabia, Yasser Arafat from the PLO. It was this huge spectacle.
Right.
It cemented Bhutto's image as a leader of the Third World and the Islamic bloc. He wanted to show everyone that even after losing half the country, Pakistan was still a major player on the world stage.
And to be a major player in that Cold War era, you needed one specific thing. We have to talk about the Islamic bomb.
We will eat grass.
That quote is just legendary. Pakistan will fight for 1,000 years. If India builds the atom bomb, Pakistan will eat grass or leaves, even go hungry, but we will get one of our own.
It sends shivers down your spine, doesn't it? The sheer defiance in that statement. And it wasn't just rhetoric. Bhutto is, without a doubt, the father of the Pakistani nuclear program.
The notes mention a secret meeting in the city of Multan in 1972, right after the war.
Yes, the Multan Conference. It's almost mythical now. He gathers the country's top scientists and engineers under a tent, literally, and he asks them one question: can you give me the bomb?
And what do they say?
Well, they hesitate about the timeline. They say it will take time. It's complex. He pushes them. He demands it. He tells them money is no object.
And he brings in the heavy hitters.
He brings in Dr. Abdul Qadir Khan A.Q. Khan, who was a metallurgist working in Europe at a sensitive nuclear facility called Urenco. Khan brought the crucial centrifuge technology designs needed to enrich uranium. Bhutto gave these scientists a blank check and total political cover.
But this wasn't happening in a vacuum. The U.S. was watching.
Oh, very closely. The U.S. was terrified of nuclear proliferation, especially in such an unstable region. There's a famous and frankly chilling account of a meeting between Bhutto and the U.S. Secretary of State, Henry Kissinger, in Lahore.
What happened?
Kissinger reportedly warned him, point blank, if you do not cancel this program, we will make a horrible example of you.
Make a horrible example of you. That sounds like a threat from a mafia don, not a diplomat.
It shows you the stakes. Bhutto was directly defying a superpower. He set up this whole clandestine network to acquire the technology, always claiming it was for peaceful energy, but the intent was clearly for weapons capability.
Yeah, he later used that threat from Kissinger, didn't he?
He did. He used it as a badge of honor, claiming his life was in danger because he stood up for the Islamic bomb and for the sovereignty of the Muslim world.
So he's building the bomb, he's rewritten the Constitution, he's nationalized the economy, he seems to be in total control. But looking at the timeline, things start to get dark around the mid-70s. The man of the people starts acting a lot like the autocrats he replaced.
Here's where the Democrat label starts to seriously fray. Bhutto had an authoritarian streak a mile wide. He did not handle dissent well. If you disagreed with him, you weren't just a political opponent. You were an enemy of the state.
The notes mention a federal security force. What was that?
The FSF. Theoretically, it was a special federal force to assist the police with serious crime. In practice, it was Bhutto's private militia.
Wow.
They were used to harass, intimidate, and even physically attack political opponents. They broke up opposition rallies. They abducted critics. It created a very real climate of fear.
And then there's the situation in the province of Balochistan.
He dismissed the elected provincial government there, which led to a full-blown insurgency that lasted from 1973 to 1977. He sent in the army. It was a brutal, bloody conflict with heavy casualties on both sides.
I have to ask about the Iraqi embassy raid. That detail in the notes jumped out at me as just totally bizarre.
It's a fascinating anecdote that really shows his ruthlessness. In 1973, Bhutto ordered a raid on the Iraqi embassy in Islamabad. Now, you don't just do that. That's technically sovereign territory.
It's a major diplomatic incident.
Huge.
Yeah.
But his special forces went in and they found crates containing 300 submachine guns and thousands of rounds of ammunition, all hidden in diplomatic bags.
Since they were smuggling weapons via diplomatic pouch.
Yes. The weapons were allegedly destined for the Baloch separatists. And Bhutto used this discovery to justify his military crackdown, claiming there was a foreign conspiracy to break up Pakistan. He expelled the Iraqi ambassador and really just flexed his muscles on the international stage.
Okay, so tensions are extremely high. We get to 1977. He calls for new elections.
He was confident he thought he would sweep them. And on paper, the PPP did win a massive majority. But the opposition alliance, a coalition called the PNA, immediately cried foul. They claimed the election was stolen.
Was it rigged?
Most credible historians agree there was significant rigging. Bhutto probably would have won anyway, but his local party leaders wanted to ensure a clean sweep, so they went overboard. They stuffed ballot boxes in key constituencies. The scale of the victory was just too good to be true.
And the reaction?
An explosion. Street protests erupted across the country. But here is the critical shift. The opposition, which was a mix of parties, started using religious language. They united under the demand for Nizam-e-Mustafa, the rule of the Prophet.
So they turned it into a religious crusade against him.
Exactly. They attacked Bhutto for his drinking, his Western lifestyle. They painted him as un-Islamic, as an enemy of the faith.
And Bhutto tries to negotiate, right?
He does. He backpedals. He bans alcohol. He closes nightclubs. He declares Friday as the weekly holiday instead of Sunday, all in an attempt to appease the religious right. But it was too little, too late. It was blood in the water. The chaos in the streets gave the military the perfect pretext they needed to step in.
Enter General Zia-ul-Haq.
The man Bhutto appointed. And this is the great tragic irony. Bhutto had skipped over 5, some say 7, senior generals to appoint Zia as the chief of army staff.
Why Zia? What did he see in him?
He saw someone who appeared to be totally apolitical. Zia was outwardly religious. He was humble. He seemed subservient. Bhutto famously and dismissively called him his monkey general in private circles, thinking this was a man he could easily control. He thought Zia was safe.
Talk about a miscalculation.
A fatal one. On July 5, 1977, General Zia launches Operation Fair Play. He declares martial law. Bhutto is arrested in the middle of the night from his residence.
But Zia says he's just going to hold elections in 90 days and leave, right?
Yeah.
That was the initial promise.
That was the promise, 90 days. But Zia quickly realized something that must have terrified him. The intelligence reports were showing that despite all the protests, the PPP was still massively popular. If he held free and fair elections, Bhutto might actually win again.
And if Bhutto wins?
Zia is a dead man. Bhutto would have him tried for treason under Article 6 of the Constitution, the very Constitution that Bhutto himself wrote. As the famous saying went at the time, there is only one grave for 2 men.
Wow.
Zia decided it wasn't going to be his grave.
So Bhutto has to go. But you can't just shoot a former prime minister. You need a legal justification. This leads to the murder charge.
The Kazuri case. This goes back to 1974. A rogue politician and a former Bhutto ally, a man named Ahmed Raza Kasuri, was ambushed in his car in Lahore. Kasuri himself survived, but his father, Nawab Muhammad Hamid Khan Kasuri, who was in the car with him, was killed in the gunfire.
And Kasuri blamed Bhutto from the start.
Immediately. He went to the police station and filed a report claiming Bhutto was the mastermind because Kasuri had been a vocal critic of his in Parliament. The case had gone cold for years. Zia revived it.
And how did they pin it on Bhutto? What was the evidence?
The star witness was the former director of the FSF, that private militia we talked about, a man named Masood Mahmood. He was arrested, and he was basically offered a deal. Turn state's witness against Bhutto, testify that Bhutto ordered the hit, and we will pardon you.
And he took the deal.
He took the deal. His testimony was the cornerstone of the prosecution's case.
The trial itself, the notes call it a judicial murder.
That is the term history has settled on, and for good reason. It was held in the Lahore High Court. The bench was headed by a Chief Justice, Maulvi Mushtaq, who was known to have a deep personal grudge against Bhutto, had passed him over for a promotion years earlier.
So the judge was biased from the outset.
The whole atmosphere was hostile. Bhutto was insulted in court. He was placed in a dock like a common criminal. International observers were watching this.
Right, like who?
The former U.S. Attorney General Ramsey Clark witnessed parts of the proceedings and called them a complete sham, totally biased. But it didn't matter. The verdict came down. Guilty. Sentenced to death.
He appealed to the Supreme Court.
He did, and this is where it gets just agonizingly close. The Supreme Court was deeply, deeply divided. In the end, the conviction was upheld by the narrowest possible margin, 4-3.
One vote. One single vote decided the fate of the country's most popular, most consequential leader. That is incredibly heavy.
It's staggering to think about.
Did he ask for mercy? Did he plead with Zia?
No. Bhutto was a man of immense pride. To him, that would have been the ultimate humiliation. He refused to plead for mercy from a dictator he considered an illegitimate usurper. He spent his final days in a squalid death cell in Rawalpindi, writing his final political testament, a book called If I Am Assassinated.
The world must have reacted. I mean, leaders around the globe must have been calling for clemency.
The world begged for his life. Leonid Brezhnev from the Soviet Union, the Chinese leadership, the Saudi king, the Pope, even U.S. President Jimmy Carter appealed directly to Zia for clemency. They all said, don't do this, exile him, imprison him for life, but don't hang him.
But Zia ignored them all.
He did. He was convinced that if Bhutto lived, Zia would die. It was that simple for him. On the morning of April 4th, 1979, Zulfikar Ali Bhutto was hanged at Rawalpindi District Jail.
The notes mention his last words.
Reportedly, as he was led to the gallows, he said, "Oh Lord, help me, for I am innocent." They cut him down, flew his body to his ancestral village in Sindh, and buried him in the family graveyard before the country even woke up.
It's just such a heavy ending. Zia must have thought that by killing the man, he would kill the movement.
And he could not have been more wrong. His death made Bhutto a martyr. The ghost of Bhutto haunted Zia for his entire 11-year rule. The PPP remained a massive political force.
And his daughter, Benazir Bhutto, picked up the mantle.
She did. She struggled against the dictatorship, she suffered imprisonment and exile, and eventually became the first female prime minister of a Muslim country in 1988, right after Zia died in a plane crash.
And tragically, she was assassinated 2 years later.
The Bhutto family history is just steeped in blood and politics. It's often compared to the Kennedys in the U.S., the glamour, the power, and what seems like a curse.
But let's go back to that 2024 Supreme Court opinion we mentioned at the start. What exactly happened there? Why bring this up 45 years later?
It was a presidential reference, a legal question filed years ago that finally got a proper hearing. And the Supreme Court of Pakistan, in a formal opinion, officially acknowledged the deep flaws in the judicial process of 1979.
So they didn't overturn the verdict, because you can't, but they admitted it was wrong.
They essentially admitted that the trial was not fair, that due process was manipulated, and that the judges were not acting independently. In spirit, yes, they admitted it was a wrongful execution.
It's a historic correction.
It came 45 years too late to save his life. But for his family and his party, it was a vindication they had been fighting for half a century.
So, if we zoom out, how do we sum up the legacy of Zulfikar Ali Bhutto?
It's a legacy that is cleaved right down the middle, just like the country was in 1971. To his supporters, the Gallows, as they're called, he is the hero who gave the poor a voice, who gave the country its only consensus constitution, and who gave the nation the ultimate security guarantee, the nuclear bomb. He put Pakistan on the map.
And to his critics.
To his critics, he was a feudal autocrat hiding in democratic clothing, a man who was dangerously intolerant of opposition, whose economic policies ruined the middle class, and whose refusal to share power in 1971 was the primary catalyst for the breakup of the country.
It's amazing how one person can be both of those things at the same time.
That's the nature of these huge transformational figures. They don't fit into neat little boxes. He was brilliant, and he was deeply flawed. He built institutions, and he undermined them.
Here's a question that's been nagging me as we've talked. We discussed the nuclear program and that famous "eat grass" quote. Do you think South Asian geopolitics would look fundamentally different today if he hadn't pushed for that bomb?
Oh, completely. Without that nuclear deterrence, the power dynamic between India and Pakistan would be vastly different. Pakistan's strategic behavior, its confidence, its alliances, all of it hinges on that nuclear capability that Bhutto initiated. Whether you think the bomb is a good thing or a bad thing, you cannot deny that he fundamentally altered the strategic DNA of the entire region.
And one final thought to leave our listeners with. We talk about 1971, the great what if.
Yes, the great counterfactual of Pakistani history.
If Zulfikar Ali Bhutto had just accepted the results of the 1970 election, if he had been willing to sit on the opposition benches and let Sheikh Mujib become prime minister,
Pakistan might still be one united country today. Bangladesh might not exist. The map of South Asia would look completely different.
the lives of hundreds of millions of people would be different.
And it's a haunting question that really highlights the terrible, terrible cost of political ambition.
Something to chew on. We've covered a lot of ground today, from the halls of Oxford to the death cell in Rawalpindi. Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, a man who lived fast, aimed high, and paid the ultimate price.
A fascinating and tragic deep dive into a life that shaped history.
Thanks for listening, everyone. We'll catch you on the next one.